I'm also on the realization that it was 50 years ago, I believe 50 years ago yesterday, November 9th, that I obtained my first provisional radio broadcasting license, allowing me to operate a transmitter until I got the third class license, which is what we needed at the time. So I could go on talking about my involvement with WGMC radio starting 50 years ago, but I actually want to talk about how I got my first radio job, which didn't happen until three years later, I believe, 1978. Actually, that's 4 years later, isn't it? So it all started when I had been working at WGMC, and I turned 17 and I was looking for my first job. And my mother worked for visiting nurse service on Prince Street in downtown Rochester at the time. So this happened several times over the summer of 1978, when I would ride with my mother to downtown Rochester, and she would drop me off, and I would literally walk the beat applying for jobs at radio stations. I remember there were a couple on East Avenue, which was WHAM at the time, and WSAY was also on East Avenue at the time. I wasn't even thinking of television, because I knew Channel 10 was on East Avenue at the time as well, but that didn't come until later. WAXC was on Chester. I'm blanking out on the street name. It was in a building on, oh my gosh, I'm blanking out. Sorry about that. But anyways, WAXC, I applied for a job there, and a couple other places. So the one that stood out the most to me, because it's ultimately where I got my job, was on East Main Street. There was a small building that was, I think, two buildings away from the auditorium theater, and the upstairs is where WNYR radio 680 on the AM dial, and also WEZO 101.3 FM were both located. At that time, the FCC did not allow multiple ownerships of radio stations like they do now. They could have an AM-FM combo, and that was about it, unless there was a TV station that was also involved. So WEZO and WNYR were both owned by Mulwhite Corporation at the time. And anybody who remembers WEZO from the late 60s and 1970s will remember the voice of Jerry Warner. He was the smooth-talking radio announcer who was the voice of WEZO 24 hours a day, and then he was on live in the morning for a morning show. The rest of the day he was on pre-recorded announcements. You're listening to WEZO 101.3 stereo. Beautiful music all the time. Something like that. So when I first started dropping in there, I didn't have any hope for getting a DJ shift on WNYR, because I was basically inexperienced to commercial radio announcing at the time. But WEZO was an automated station, meaning that you set up the equipment, you set up the reels of tapes, and a small computer system literally ran the station. It was basically a sequence, very, very simple by today's standards. We had 4 reel-to-reel tape machines. As I recall, 2 reels would run, these were 90-minute reels, and as I recall, 2 reels would run on 2 of the machines that were songs that they wanted to play more frequently, and then 1 or 2 other reels that were songs that they didn't want to play quite as often, but did want to get the songs in rotation. So they had the sequence set up. And then anybody that would remember those 8-track cartridges, well, we also had radio versions of that. It was a much better quality. The speed of the tape going through it was a lot quicker, but they looked the same. And these cartridges is where announcements were recorded and commercials. And these were on a couple of carousel things that were in there. The sequencer would tell the carousel which cartridge needed to be in the machine at a certain time so that it could play the commercial. And then there were two larger versions of that Jerry had recorded every single minute of the day, figuring on a 12-hour clock, because you don't need to say AM or PM. So if you remember Jerry Warner from those days, the WEZO time is 12:03. Well, those were recorded on these two larger format cartridges, and they would play through. They had all the evens on one and all the odds on the other, for the simple reason that you wanted to have one ready to go with the actual time and not be caught mid-sentence when he's saying, is 12:03. I think you might get my point if you can comprehend what I'm talking about. So anyways, that was my job. I started out working on Saturday and Sunday evenings. It was a part-time job for me. I was still in school, high school, senior in high school at Greece Arcadia. And I started in September of 1978. Although it wasn't Jerry that hired me, it was the chief engineer, because I had stopped in several times over the summer. And I got to know Jerry. And I remember at one point, he made a joke about the beautiful music that was playing. So relaxing. And I was just asking him, so what are my responsibilities? And he said, your number one responsibility is to stay awake. Which I thought was funny. So, I don't know, maybe 3 visits over the summer. And then I got a phone call. No, I'm sorry, the last visit where I stopped in, Jerry said that he wasn't doing the hiring anymore, but he introduced me to this new guy, John Hurst, who was the chief engineer. So I had a chat with John, and I think probably a month or 2 later, John called me up and said, hey, I have a job opening for you. And like I said, it was for Saturday and Sunday evenings. So I would go in there Saturdays and Sundays, starting at 5 p.m., I believe, both days. On Saturdays, I worked until midnight, and on Sundays, I think I worked until 10 p.m. Maybe because I was underage, I don't remember, but I had to get out at 10 p.m. And it was a good first experience for me, just keeping up with the machine. I got to know the DJs who were on the AM station, WNYR, because they were still on the air. So when they were finished up, I chatted with them, got to know them. And this lasted until February of 1979. I'm not really sure what happened, because John called me in one day, had me take care of some log corrections that he felt needed to be corrected, and then he told me that he was letting me go. He said something about something that I did wrong. It was never brought up to me before if I actually did anything wrong. A good friend of mine who was also working there at the time had also been let go. And, I thought about it through the years. The only thing I can surmise is they were doing some kind of cleaning house. I don't really know what it was, but overall it was a good experience for me. It led me to more radio jobs after that, and that's how I got my start. Now, Stacey and I talked about this because her dad used to listen to WEZO all the time, just like my parents did. And she specifically remembers Christmas Eve 1978, because at that time radio stations were not playing Christmas music 24 hours a day non-stop for a month before Christmas. They would mix in a few Christmas songs here and there throughout the hour, and otherwise play their regular format. Except on Christmas Eve and Christmas Day for WEZO. That's when they made a big deal out of playing non-stop Christmas music for Christmas Eve and then all day on Christmas Day. And I remember going in and working on Christmas Eve, 1978. All the Christmas music was playing, and my future wife was back home hearing it because her dad was playing it on the radio. Isn't that sweet? So anyways, those are some memories of my first job working at WEZO, affiliated with WNYR for Mulwhite Communications in 1978 and 79. That's all for Hot Chocolate with Paul for today. Have a good day. Hot Chocolate with Paul is a video log of life experiences that I feel might inspire other people. I'm a minimalist 60-plus geezer in the making. Sometimes my wife Stacey will appear. Be sure to subscribe to this channel so you can catch new videos whenever they come out.